morning.
Good morning.
So let's talk about the real estate market right now.
Yes.
It always seems to change and have its ebbs and flows, but we always seem to be pretty strong in Ottawa.
We are. We're pretty much one of those markets that defy gravity, kind of say. So thanks to the Ottawa Real Estate Board, they update us every month. And so what we saw in September was, again, another good, strong month.
Okay, let's take a look at what we saw for the residential sales in September. And from a 2018 to 2019 period, we saw an increase.
We did, actually. So what we saw was the fact that when we compare from last year to this year, we saw a 5.9% increase when we look at two-story units. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of different, from 1.5 stories to the side splits and the back splits. But if we look at the general, if we look at the two-story units, is the fact that we saw a 5.9% increase already from last year to this year.
Wow. And this is for just the month of September.
Yes.
So, I mean, if we were to factor in a whole season, because we saw strong sales throughout the summer months, the spring, we're just seeing a rise overall, aren't we?
We are. As I've mentioned to you before, as we refer to it, we like to refer to it as a market correction. It's not a bubble. I don't want anybody out there, any of the audience members to say, well, we're in a bubble and we're going to see a crash. Right now, the way that the Ottawa Board has referenced this is not only a market correction, but we also see a strong 2020 moving forward.
I want to talk about that too a little bit later, but let's talk about what a market correction means, because it just means we should have maybe been at these prices all along.
Absolutely. We're in Ottawa. We're very cautious. We're very polite. We like to make sure that our pennies are in the right places. And so for a long time, the Ottawa market did not move. And so now they're just saying, oh, I am going to be okay. But definitely, it's one of those things that we were expecting for a long time, and hence why we're seeing an increase on average of about 5 to 6% in that range.
Let's look at condominiums and where we are with condos, because that's another story of success. I mean, look at this, 61% increase year over year.
This is the jaw drop market for sure.
Say.
So condominiums for a long time were not touched at all. And finally, people are not only taking condo investment properly, but they're taking it very seriously. And so what we are seeing with condo purchases, and you have the two-story ones, which are the townhome style condos. Yeah. And then you also have the apartment style, which is something that automatically comes to mind when you think of condos.
Yeah, and that's a significant increase too.
It's significant. It's the fact that we are seeing people downsize into this market, and so they are taking their 6 months down south.
Yeah.
And whether it's Phoenix or Florida or Mexico, but they're taking that opportunity to live a little lighter. Is
this then a sign of the baby boomers, the older generation, baby boomers starting to get out of those big 5-bedroom homes? Like you say, spend half the year somewhere south where it's hot, spend the other half of the year in something small here in town.
Absolutely. That's what we're seeing, as well as condominiums at the same time with proper education offer the first-time home buyers. A two-story condo is really a great opportunity for a first-time home buyer, for the millennials to get into the market and not spend over that $350 mark. A lot of these are still within a very affordable range. And so that's why we are seeing the growth that we are in condominiums.
Are we seeing a lot of people too, homeowners wanting to make an investment and saying, look, let's buy up a condo and rent it out? Are we seeing a lot of that?
We are, and that's something that we'll talk about further, is the fact that people are realizing that investment in real estate is something that you may want to consider moving forward and adding to your portfolio per se.
So the average sale price in September in Ottawa in 2018 was $277,000. It's gone up to $343,000.
Isn't that?
That is remarkable.
Yep.
A 43.5% increase of market sales.
And again, these are from the Ottawa Real Estate Board. And the fact is that if you're in that sweet spot, that 350 to 500 range, that market is moving and still moving even during what we often see during election time. If you're in that market, you will find that you are still getting multiple offers, and this is a very affordable price point for the generation that's out there right now.
And we're talking now about, is it a good idea to invest in real estate? And if you want to do it, all the steps you must take. It sounds glorious and sounds like a wonderful idea, but you have to be maybe the right kind of person, have the right kind of financing. There's a lot of things that go into it. So we gave you the numbers on what real estate looks like in our city. I would imagine this is an excellent city in this country to invest in the real estate market.
Absolutely, because right now we're finding that the rental and vacancy rate is zero in a lot of places. So it's a great opportunity for you to invest in real estate as well as have your possibly a great tenant to help pay down those bills.
Okay, is this for you? Let's run through it. If you're thinking about it, this is what you need. You will need help. That sounds pretty true.
It sounds so obvious, and yet it absolutely is true. If you're thinking about sitting down and considering real estate for an investment and loading up your portfolio, talk to a real estate agent, talk to a lawyer, and possibly even talk to your financial planner, because this is something that is that's going to take some paperwork and some thought. So I really encourage anybody who's considering it, definitely get some help. Plan for sure. So if you live in Orleans, let's say, I wouldn't necessarily recommend investing in Canada unless you plan on completely offloading all the work in regards to a property manager. So, think about where you want to invest in and go from there.
Okay. How much rent you can charge versus that investment. You want to make sure you're going to be not going in the hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to the first point as well. So when you look at your investment, I want you to look at how much rent you can charge. So are you looking at buying a condo? Are you looking at buying a townhome? Are you looking at buying a single family home? And then from there, you will find out how much rent you can charge.
And how do you get that information? Do you just look at other homes in the neighborhood?
As well as talk to your realtor. A realtor can definitely help you in regards to the fact that it could be $800, it could be $2,200, but you really need to know how much rent you can charge versus the fact what your monthly payments are, because what we really want is at least a zero value, if not a plus profit value.
Right. Okay. Neighborhood considerations. This is a big one. Goes back to what you were saying about you're not going to maybe buy in Orleans if you live in Canada, or invest in Orleans if you live in Canada, unless you're sourcing out all the work that needs to be done.
Right. It's all about what we refer to as your return of investment, your ROI. And so when you look at your neighborhoods, it will also affect how much investment you have available into it. Certain neighborhoods are obviously more expensive, but at the same time, that will also affect the amount of rent that you can charge.
Okay.
So you really need to figure out what kind of tenants you want, how much investment you want, and what kind of return of investment you actually want.
A lot to think about. Bank repossessions. What kind of home are you getting if it's a bank repossessed home?
So this is something that a lot of people are talking about and have for my decade of experience. They often say, well, we're going to get a deal if it's a bank repo. Well, you really need to consider this. There often is a deal to be had, and we can offer that to you, but at the same time, the property itself is what we refer to as an as-is, where-is situation.
Yeah.
And so if there's any significant damage to the home, which often there is in this case, that's up to you and not the seller.
You're buying it that way, and so
Yes.
as the owner, you have to fix it. Tenant adoption, what does this mean?
So this is a great opportunity, and it is something that actually I have taken advantage of personally, is the fact that there are a lot of opportunities out there. If you're working with a really smart and savvy realtor, is the fact that you can find properties where the tenant wants to stay, and the listing agent is just selling it with a person involved.
Yeah.
And so they want to stay, and so already you have a great tenant and a great property, and you just...
Makes it pretty easy.
Absolutely.
We're out of time, but financing and insurance, this goes without saying. You have to have your finances in order. You have to know what you're going to spend.
And understand that financing and insurance is different with investment properties than your own property. And so financing is minimum 20% down immediately, as well as your insurance is different when it comes to investment property. It's not your principal residence. And so you really need to understand those concepts, because that raises the price things in your back pocket.
Again, that's all the kind of information you get from the lawyer, from your realtor,
Absolutely.
from the experts in the field. It's not the kind of stuff we would all necessarily know
No.
about. Now, at renting versus buying, this is a big one because we're in a city where people are, it's a transient city. People come here for a short amount of time, government town, and then they're on to another city. Also, some people want to put down roots here and live here for a while. So there's a lot of different reasons why people may want to rent or buy. And let's get into what you recommend people think about before they do either or. First, you say, how long will you be in the home? That's a great question.
It absolutely is, because my first headspace as a real estate broker is the fact that, you know, renting versus buying. Do you really want to pad someone else's pocket, and do you have to? Some of our wonderful new Canadians who are coming into our city have to rent for a while because they simply don't have the money to be in the country. It needs to be minimum for 6 months.
Right.
But there's also people here who are transient, and the fact is that if you're going to be in the house 3 years or less, there really is something to be considered in the fact that maybe you should rent rather than buying, just in case our market goes a little south. So it is something to consider when you're looking at renting versus buying.
Would you say 3 years is that time frame?
3 to 5,
3 to 5.
definitely. I often talk to my buyers and saying, I really don't want to sell your home more than 5 years is my headspace. But I'd like to say, if you're looking at renting versus buying, 3 to 5 is definitely the trademark.
How much debt do you have? Of course, this is a big one.
It is a big one, because you have to, even if you're putting less than 5% down, if you have a lot of debt, maybe you should be consolidating that and looking at renting, in the fact that you need to add, you need to pay down some of your debt in order to get to the buying component.
Okay. How do you have an emergency fund?
You know, we unfortunately hear time and time again that Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's not something I'm ever comfortable with my clients. I protect my clients, and we often, you know, say, I don't want my clients, you know, living on craft
House
dinner,
poor.
right?
Yeah.
We don't want them house poor at all. And so do you have enough in your back pocket that if you were to lose your job, unfortunately, do you have an emergency fund for 3 months to get you through those hard times?
Something to consider certainly in the buying category, right?
Absolutely.
How much do you have saved for a down payment? This is big because we've seen the percentages change as to how much you have to put down.
Absolutely. So, you know, if you have that 20%, which is great, then definitely you should be considered buying. But if you have no down payment, then you might, or you have none, you might end up going with what we refer to as an alternative lender, and then your mortgage payments are a little bit higher. So we really want people to pay attention to what they would pay in rent versus what they would pay if they purchase. A lot of times, actually, a lot of people don't realize if you buy, it's cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, sometimes you can see that, especially with a lot of new builds too, that those monthly mortgage payments can actually be cheaper than rent.
Absolutely. Renting month to month is more expensive, but at the same time we have to consider things like like we've mentioned, can you afford everything else?
Yeah, the maintenance and upkeep is another big one too.
Right. So if you're looking at renting a townhome, let's say, or even a home, the fact is that you still have to mow that lawn.
Right.
You still have to take care of that property.
Which means you have to have a lawnmower. You have to have all that other stuff, all those other expenses that come into play.